Okay, folks, in this final video for our layers panel segment, I'm going to touch on just about 3 or 4 more items before ending the video series for our layer system. Okay, now you folks probably have noticed with the previous 2 videos that they were quite lengthy. I apologize for that. Um, and even doing those 2 videos as well as this one, I probably only covered roughly about a quarter or a third of all of the options available just for the layer panel. Okay, so sorry for the long videos, but just so you folks know, there's way more um, things that I would have needed to teach you. It's just that whatever I have shown you so far, as well as what I'm going to show you in this video, is pretty much all you need to know to do most Photoshop projects as well as our own project. Okay, and as I always say, if you folks want to explore the other options or actions available for the layer panel or for Photoshop in general, you folks need to take it upon yourselves to go and research on your own. Lots of videos out there on YouTube that show you folks how to tackle some of the other options available. So keep that in mind as we move on. Okay, so for this particular video, I have a random picture of a guy holding his lower back. Uh, Only got one layer here. I'm going to start off with showing you guys opacity. Now, you folks may remember opacity from my paintbrush video. Now, the opacity here, basically there's 3 ways to change the opacity. You can click on this down arrow, use the slider. You can click in this box and type in a number manually, or you can hover over the opacity and hold down your left mouse button and drag left to right. And notice what happens when I do that. Okay, so the guy, the opacity slowly goes back and forth as such. Now, when you have the opacity low, the background or whatever layer is underneath of the layer you have an opacity on shows through. In this case, our background is white, so of course white is showing through. Now, if our background was, say, green, so let me select the background and let's change the color to green. So I'm going to select green here, and I'm going to fill the background with the green color. So remember, background color, or actually we're going to use foreground color because green is in the foreground, white is in the background. I'm going to click OK. So now that green is the background color, it's showing through this image here, okay, because it has opacity. Once I start cranking the opacity back to 100, the green will slowly disappear. Okay, I do have white in this picture, these areas here. Now I could use a layer mask and paint out the white so that the green shows through, but for now, just to show you folks how opacity works, I just wanted to add green to the background here. Okay. So that's opacity. It's pretty much straightforward. I don't really use fill that much. Most of the time, you folks will just be using opacity. You guys can fool around with the fill on your own. Fill does almost the same thing. There's only a few situations where you will actually be able to see the fill versus opacity, how similar and different they act. And in my notes on the Photoshop class website, I give an example of that. Okay, if we have time, I may show you folks that in this video. Let's move on to blend modes. This is a list of the different blend modes here. So as you notice, so what I've done is I clicked on this box. This is the blend modes box, and I got in a drop down menu. Now as you move your cursor down the list, you see the different effects or blending effects of each type of blend mode available. Some are good and some not so good. Okay, so that's blend modes. Now I want to show you how using a blend mode and opacity together can really make a difference when combining images together. Okay, so there's a reason why I chose this image, and that's because I wanted to add a tattoo to the back of this guy's back. So I just pulled some random art I found on Google of this dragon here. Okay, so let's make this a little bit smaller, like so, and maybe rotate it a little bit. And I'm going to right click and choose warp and kind of warp the image a little bit to follow the contour of this guy's back. Like so. But of course, that's not the end of it. I'm going to hit return or enter to accept the changes. Now, of course, nobody has a tattoo that looks like that. That's where blend mode comes in. And with my tattoo layer selected, this is my tattoo layer, I've already positioned the image the way I want it, and I warped the image a little bit just to follow the sort of follow the way he's bending. Now I'm going to use the blend mode to take away that white. So looks like, if I go through the different options here, you see the different types of blend modes give different effects. Looks like these set here. Let's go and multiply. So it still looks a little bit too dark. That's where opacity comes in. Now if I lower the opacity, little bit, now it starts to look a little bit more like a tattoo. Okay, so what I have it, let's put it at 50% opacity. Now I'm gonna hit Command T to bring back my scaling or transformation tool, and I'm going to right click on it and choose warp once more, and I'm going to reposition or warp this so it looks a little bit more like it's an actual tattoo on his back. And just hit return or enter. So just fool around with your different blend modes here till you get something that you like, and combine it if you want to with the opacity to give you sort of a faded look, if that's the type of image you're looking for. And you could even go one step further, and some tattoos, as they get older, the pigmentation in the tattoo goes from black to sort of like a bluish black. So you could even go a step further and add an adjustment layer. Remember, the adjustment layer from previous video, and I could go to hue saturation and do something called colorize. I could click on that. And remember, if you don't click this button, it affects all of the layers below that. We only want to affect the tattoo, so I'm going to click this. So it only affects the tattoo layer, right? Remember this little icon here? It only affects the layer down below it. So let me get the properties back here. And let's, you can't really see too much. I guess it doesn't really play out too well on here. Probably because the tattoo has too much black in it. But, you know, like all adjustment layers, if it doesn't work for you, you can always just drag it down to the trash and get rid of it. Okay? So I've just shown you adjustment, not adjustment, blend modes right here, as well as opacity. Now let's check out this button up in the upper right hand corner. So this button has a whole bunch of options here. You can create a new layer here, duplicate, delete. So basically all the same functions as these buttons here, pretty much. The ones that I want you to concentrate on, and by the way, a lot of these options, you get the same options if you just right click on here. You got the blending options, which I just showed you here. Duplicate layer, delete layer, group from layers, which I showed you in a previous video. That's to create a folder. All of these we don't really deal with for our purposes. Convert to smart object if it's rasterized. None of these here will play with. Rasterized layer if you want to convert a smart object to a rasterized image. Create a clipping mask, that's the same thing as a layer mask. Oh, I know what. There is a couple more items. Let's see. Layer effects. That's what I wanted to cover with you folks. Okay, layer effects is important in that it allows you to add special effects to your layers. Okay, so in order to do that, let me go ahead and for now get rid of the picture of the guy. I'm going to switch my background color back to white, and for the tattoo I'm going to go back to normal mode and bring the opacity back to 100, and I'm going to use this guy, or what I should do is create a copy of him. So I'm going to drag him down, turn off the visibility of that, and work with the copy. I'm going to resize him back to normal. Well, instead of back to normal, I mean where it's a little bit more visible. Center him here. And he still has a white background. So what I'm going to do is I have to rasterize the layer first. So I'm going to rasterize the layer so it's no longer a smart object. I'm going to get rid of all of the white in the background. Now you can't see that because I have a white background, so if I change the background back to green, you'll see all the white there. So let me get rid of the white first. So I'm going to click on there, and I'm going to show you folks a trick here. If you want to get rid of a particular color in the entire image, but there's all these little nooks and crannies, instead of holding down your shift key and clicking on every little single area here, what you can do, it doesn't work all the time, but maybe in this situation it will. So you come up to the select menu up here, and you're going to choose select similar. Since I already clicked on white, Photoshop, once I select this, will look for all the white in the picture and select it. Now I can do one of two things. I can either hit the delete key or backspace key for you PC guys, and if I do that, I get that. I take out all the white. Or let me Command Z to undo. I could add a layer mask. Remember, layer mask is a non-destructive way of getting rid of something without destroying your picture. Now you folks notice what happened was the opposite of what I wanted to happen. The easy way to fix that, if you look at my layer mask here, is instead of taking out the white, it got rid of all the black. And to flip that around, you just come up to Image, Adjustments, and you're gonna invert. Okay, so Image, Adjustments, Invert, and there you go. So if you don't want to cut out all the white from the image, you can use a layer mask. Irregardless, you know. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit the delete key instead. Oh, sorry. So this is what would have happened if I did not go up to select and click similar. This is what would have happened. Okay, so with the magic wand, come up to select similar. Now if I hit the delete key, it gets rid of all the white. All right. Now to show you folks, let me switch my background back to white too. Now to show you folks layer options. So if you double click on the layer, you get this box that pops up. These are layer effects. It says layer style up here. I call it layer effects. And what it does is you can add a bunch of special effects to the layer. And it's really a wonderful way of showing or giving special effects features to your layer. And you can do it one of two ways, either by double clicking anywhere on the layer or clicking this FX button here. Okay, I just usually double click on a layer. So say, for example, if you wanted to have a drop shadow on here, just click drop shadow, click here so that you can access the drop shadow options or functions. You can change the distance of the drop shadow. So if you watch my image here, you can change the distance of the drop shadow. You can change the spread, the size, combination of all three, and it really does make a difference. Okay, you can change the angle of the lighting, the light source. So what this little lever does is, by left mouse clicking and dragging the lever, you're telling Photoshop to put the light source wherever this lever is. So the lever is pointing up here, that means the light source is coming from here. So if the light source is coming from here, that means the shadow is going to be here, because the light is coming down this way. So if the light source was on this side, of course the shadow would be on this side. And you get a little visual representation here in the preview area. So watch what happens to the shadow right here. So this is like your image. This icon right here represents the dragon. And right now the shadow is down here because the light source is coming from up here and it's casting a shadow down. So watch what happens to the shadow when I bring the light source over to this side. You see that the shadow changes as well as it changes here. Now if the light source is directly up, the light shadow is down below. And of course you can always type in the number here, 90 degrees, and it's straight up and down. For now I'm gonna leave the shadow off to the left here. Okay, you can control the opacity of the shadow. You can make the shadow really dark, but that doesn't look good, right? So you want to leave it a little bit light. You can change the blend mode of the shadow. Remember, we just went through different blend modes. So if you click on that, you can choose overlay, makes the shadow disappear, go back to multiply, bring back the shadow. You can change the color of the shadow by clicking on this black square here. You can choose red. Now you got a red color shadow. Let's go back to black. So basically that's pretty much all you need to know for the options. I don't really mess with any of these options down here. Mainly you want to stick with the opacity, the angle, distance, spread, and size, and just go back and forth and mess with those. And once you get all of those where you want them to be, then you click OK. And as you notice, below the tattoo copy layer, it added the effects layer, and it has drop shadow here. You can close out this layer by clicking on this arrow, and you know that this layer has special effects on it because Photoshop added this FX icon on the layer. So to see those effects, you just click here and it drops down. Okay, you can turn off the visibility of the effects by clicking on that or here. Now let's add more special effects. Okay, so I'm going to double click once more. You can do other things such as well, let's turn off drop shadow for now. Let's turn on outer glow. And what outer glow does is it adds an outer glow around the item or the object. Can't really see it right now. Let's change to something else. There should be a reason why it's not popping up here. You should be able to see it. Let me see here. Maybe if you change color, put something like a blue. That's a little weird. I'm not too sure why I'm not seeing the. I can't be. Is it because I had the drop shadow off? That shouldn't be the reason why. Turning off drop shadow shouldn't have. Let's see if I get rid of the drop shadow. I'm just. By the way, if you want to delete any special effects, all you got to do is drag it down to the trash, and that's how you get rid of it. In fact, let's delete all of the effects. You can do it one of two ways. Take effects and drag it down to the trash, or take the effects icon here and drag that down to the trash, and that gets rid of the special effects. You can always start over by double clicking again, and let's go with outer glow this time. Probably because it has a white background. Let me see what would happen if I change the background to black. Ah, that's why. It's because most of the image is black. So now if I, there you go. It was kind of hard to see the blue because I had a white background, so didn't really give a chance for the blue to really shine through. So depending on your background will determine, you know, how much of something you can see. So screen, you know, if we went to overlay, you can barely see it. Soft light, no. Pin light, yeah, it gives a little bit of a darker blue effect. Linear light. You can change the size, spread. So really a lot of different options to make some really cool designs, and changing opacity and as such will really allow you to make some really nice stuff. So once again, I'm not even messing with the quality. I'm just going with the blend mode, opacity. You can choose between these two. I just leave it on this here, spread and size, and that's it. You can choose inner glow and change the options to say maybe a green color. And if you raise the choke and the size, you can now add an inner glow of green, but that doesn't look too good, so let's go with a lighter blue. That helps out a little bit better. Maybe size up. No. But you can really accent you can add multiple uh, special effects. Just click OK. And as always, you can turn the special effects on and off. And some special effects will look better with a darker background, as you see here. But if I was to change the background to something like white, then you can barely see it. I mean, you can see it a little, but it just goes to show you folks that, you folks will want to mess around with the settings a lot. You could do a color overlay. I have gray right now, but if I chose something like red, you can overlay a color over the image. I could go with a gradient overlay. I have a white gradient. If you remember about gradients, you could do that effect. You could turn off the gradient if you want. You could change the angle of the gradient. You could change from linear to radial. to angle, refracted, diamond. You can change the scale of the gradient, make it smaller or larger. Just a whole bunch of things you could do. You could change the blend mode, maybe go overlay. Some don't work that good. Screen. So you do bevel and emboss. That's always a nice. You do inner bevel, outer bevel, emboss, pillow emboss. I like the inner bevel. And you could crank up the size, soften it, the depth. So, use the layer effect sparingly. You don't want to go too overboard. Click OK. So I have a whole bunch of effects. You can turn off the effects or the visibility of each effect one at a time, or all of them by clicking this one. And as I said before, you can always trash the effects if you don't like them. You can always double up the effects. So say if I made another copy of this dragon here, by dragging this down to create a new layer, now I have two dragons with the same effects. And if I got rid of the effects on a copy, then you get the original one. So lots of different options available. Okay. When you finally are done, let me bring back the guy here. Get the tattoo. Once you have your picture done and you don't want to make any more edits to it, you can do what is called flatten the image. Basically, you're going to take all of these layers, just like a sandwich, and flatten it down into one layer. Now, let me warn you that what I'm about to show you should be your very last step to do when you're absolutely 100% sure that you are done with your poster. In your folks' situation, your poster, or when you are done editing your image, if you have some other image you're working with in Photoshop and you have a whole bunch of layers and you finally get to the point where you're satisfied, you're done with the project. What you want to do is to flatten your image to make it a smaller file size. And the way to do that is to click on this button up here. From the drop down menu, you're going to click on flatten image. And watch what happens to the layers when I click flatten image. It's going to ask you if you want to discard hidden layers. The reason it's asking me that is because I have the original tattoo layer turned off. In this case, I'm going to say, yeah, I don't need that hidden tattoo layer. Now, if I wanted to, I could click cancel and turn this back on. But of course, I don't need that tattoo layer anymore. So with that visibility turned off, I could also just automatically delete that there. So flatten image. Now you notice I just have one image here, and that is the background image, or the background. It automatically becomes background, but it's a flattened image and I can no longer edit it. So this should be the very last step for your movie poster project. Okay, folks? And that is pretty much it for the layers segment or the layers videos. Now there's a lot I didn't cover, but if you folks have any questions that you folks didn't quite get any particular part of the videos and you want me to cover it with you personally, I can do that. Just shoot me an email and let me know. Otherwise, there are lots of other tutorial videos on YouTube that further explain the other options that I didn't cover in the layers video that are on YouTube. So you folks can check those out too. I may put a link to one or two channels that focus on Photoshop a little bit later in the week in the announcement section. So keep an eye on that.